Pen Made Mightier without poison.
Welcome to Pen Made Mightier. I am Gideon Ray, and this week we're talking about Star Wars. But we're not going to talk about the Star Wars everyone loves. It's way too obvious. Instead, we're going to focus on something a little bit different. Now, before we get started with this, no expanded universe. We're talking about the core films in this, so no video games, no novels, none of that. Otherwise, we can't really move forward and talk about things adequately. So, just the movies, okay? I grew up with Star Wars. When I was really young, my parents gave me the original trilogy on VHS. And we're not talking the special edition, we're talking about the original cuts, and I've still got them. And I watched those things over and over and over again. I absolutely couldn't get enough. The characters were deep and rich, and the worlds were cool and different, but it all felt so familiar somehow. And I mean, what child couldn't be captivated by the wonder that is the original trilogy of Star Wars? But then, everything changed. The special edition movies came out, and I even went to see one of them in the theaters. Had a really good time with it. It was a great birthday. But then, something worse. The prequels.
No, God!
There's not a Star Wars fan I know that vehemently loves everything about the prequels. I know a few that'll defend them and say they're still a good time, even the third one. But I don't know too many that will say that they just love episodes 1, 2, and 3. So, I want to talk about how episode 1 was almost good. It came this close, and I feel like with one major tweak or two maybe, that it could have been a really good movie. It's just, it fell a little bit short. So, what did episode 1 manage to get right? I mean, it didn't get everything right, but it didn't get everything exactly wrong. It had some really cool world building on Tatooine. We got to understand a bit more of their economy. We got to see more of what they did for fun in their day-to-day lives with pod racing. And I mean, honestly, pod racing is probably the best part of the movie. It's not saying much, but at least it was fun. Naboo was built a little less well. There's this conflict going on between the Gungans and the other Naboo people. I'm so sorry. But it's never properly defined. We don't really know why they're fighting other than they're different races, and it's a pretty poor reason for two races to be at war, or rather not at war, but in vehement disagreement of one another. I mean, even the scene at the end where Boss Nass is like, "Peace!" and holds up the magic space marble. What is the significance? We don't know, and unlike most things where I say vague storytelling can make the audience wonder, this just fell flat for me. There was no meaning to it. There was no symbolism that I could glean out of it, and because of that, the entire thing kind of fell flat. It's not what I consider to be the biggest problem, though. Biggest problem was that it was crippled by overt racial stereotypes. It was just a huge problem. You don't believe me? Kirk, cue it up, man.
And now it's time for...
Between the Gungans...
Oh no, Mrs. Stay! Mr. Corjata Binks! Mr. Your humble servant!
That won't be necessary.
Watto and the other Toydarians...
It would be cheaper, I think, huh? Saying which...
And the Trade Federation.
It's Queen Amidala herself.
At last, we are getting results.
Mm.
Can you come before us?
Oh god, why? This movie had enough racial stereotypes to absolutely choke every horse in any field that you could find in America. It even went so far that the Trade Federation, with their, Asian-style robes and their rather racial way of speaking, just one big stereotype after another, these guys even developed droids because, of course, everyone in Asia is good at technology. I don't know, it just left me feeling really uncomfortable when I watched it again as an adult. Just doesn't feel right, just doesn't sit well with me. I really wish that had been avoided and they just developed some new character race archetypes instead. It would have would have been a lot better to just avoid the accents, to avoid the stereotypes, and avoid the problems that come with defining your characters this way. But despite all of that, the biggest problem to me isn't the overt racism, it isn't the poorly built worlds, it's the fact that we're fighting a war on 4 fronts in this movie. 4. You've got the 2 sects of Naboo between the Gungan Empire and Padme's human empire. I'm sorry, I do not know what the native surface Naboo people are called. Go ahead and rip me apart in the comments, I know you know it. But the underwater Naboo people and the surface Naboo people, and then they don't like each other and they've got conflict, and then there's the Trade Federation and their whole spiel, and then there's the Jedis and the Sith going at their whole thing. Sith playing kind of the smallest role, but you got the Jedi Sith, you got the Trade Federation, and you got the 2 sects of Naboo. And because it's a movie, and because they only have so much time, none of these groups get developed properly. You don't understand anyone's motivations or goals. The Jedi, I guess, their goal is to bring peace. Wow, that's an outstandingly original goal. But what is Padme and her lot hoping to gain out of this conflict? Other than, I mean, the Trade Federation is trying to stop trade sanctions, trying to embargo. I'm sure they go into more of it in some of the clunky dialogue, but honestly, looking back on it now, I think unless you're a Star Wars aficionado, you don't really know. And that's a problem. You should know why Naboo and the Trade Federation are at odds with each other. And you should know why the 2 sects of the Naboo people are at odds with each other.
Never tell me the odds.
And you should know why they had to call in Jedi to take care of this. I mean, you need something big, right? And it's just not there. The best they do is show that the Jedi tried to be reasonable with the Trade Federation and they tried to gun them down. And that's sort of their motivation for helping the other side, but it's not a good one. I think if the entire movie had been shrunk a little bit, if you just had the united Naboo people, you know, under Amidala or Boss Nass, I don't really care. But if you had the 2 of them standing united, or maybe just one race, why do we even need 2 races on Naboo? They've done it plenty of times in the past. Either way, Naboo needs to stand as one unit, solidified. They need to be opposed by the Trade Federation. And then they just need to say what the Trade Federation is doing that Naboo doesn't like, and make it clear that there is a war brewing between these 2 groups. The Jedi can come in, help Padme with her troubles on Naboo and Tatooine, and then after that, and getting Anakin along the way to set up future movies, they can help the Naboo people against the Trade Federation, and just when the Jedi have turned the tide in this war and it seems like peace will be absolutely solidified, uh-oh, here comes Darth Maul, and now the Sith are involved, and you can get curious about why the Sith are involved with the Trade Federation. It seems like a strange little puppet for them to be dangling around, but it's intriguing, and there's no reason for the Jedi High Council. That was just one more scene in the movie that dragged on and didn't need to be there. Could have been in the second movie, and I think if they had taken that and focused on the Jedi High Council and the clones and the Sith and all that in the second movie, primarily, that would have been a stronger movie too. It would have been more interesting. It would have been more unique if they hadn't shoehorned so many scenes into the first movie that absolutely set a sandy foundation where they needed one that was rock solid. But that being said, I feel like if the movie had been workshopped just a little bit more, it could have been a movie that we would have loved as Star Wars fans. It just goes to show you that sometimes when you get big enough and enough people aren't willing to tell you no, if you don't workshop your craft until it shines completely, you can end up with a movie that people not only don't remember well, but that people mock and people dislike. And that's a real shame for Star Wars, because it's something that brings us all so much joy. So that's something to think about. If you're a writer out there struggling, wondering if you should maybe workshop your story a little more, the answer is almost always yes. But at the end of the day, you need to make sure that your sides of opposition are clear, your conflict is understandable and easy to package for your audience, and that they have a reason to be invested. Because to me, that, in addition to the overt racism, is why Star Wars Episode 1 has gone down in a failure in a lot of people's books, or at least in mine. Thanks for sticking with me this week on Pen Made Mightier. Hope you have a great week, and I'll see you next time.